Hey guys, Scott here. Just wanted to give my thoughts on Dracula now that he's actually out. And overall, I would say I don't really like him. I'm not a huge fan of just playing him in general. I don't actually think he's a badly designed killer. I said in my first video about him on the PTB that he seemed like a very safe design choice with powers that we've already kind of seen before, and that is still pretty much true. My main complaint was the wolf form was really underwhelming, and now that you have actual normal movement speed, it's a lot better. So they did fix that, and in terms of strength, he seems pretty decent. I wouldn't say he's ever going to be like a top tier killer, but he seems pretty decent. Overall, I think a lot of people do really enjoy playing him, and that's great. I'm happy for you. This is not like, we don't have another Skull Merchant or Knight or something. I'm not like, I hate the killer or anything like that. I just personally don't like him that much, and I'm going to go over a couple of reasons why that's the case. First up, I would say the most uncomfortable thing about the killer is Hellfire. Hellfire is, for all intents and purposes, the way you hit people, it's sort of like Nemesis's tentacle that takes longer to charge up. Basically, it can shoot over things that the tentacle can, and it can't, pierce through walls like Pyramid Head's power. So that's sort of like the power comparison that I use there. Except compared to Nemesis, it takes 3 times as long to charge up. Nemesis just whoosh, just immediately hits. Here you have to charge up your power. You can see it happening. You can move very slow while it's happening. So it's a lot more telegraphed. But if you're pushing a survivor to a scenario where they're going to be animation locked, it's very, very useful. The thing I hate the most about Hellfire is the way that it aims. And what I mean by that is as soon as you click the button, it shoots off later where you were aiming when you click the button. Now, I think this is the only killer power in the game I can think of that actually does that. Pyramid Head, to an extent, locks in as soon as you press the button, but at least the camera locks in with you, so it makes visual sense what's actually happening. With this killer, you can be looking here, and then you can press the fire button, and then 1 frame later adjust your aim because the survivor moved a bit to here. And even though 1/60th of a second has passed, your power is still going to shoot this way. And I think it feels really like uncomfortable. For example, any other killer like Huntress, when you ready Hatchet, as soon as you let go, it doesn't go immediately where the trajectory would have been when you let go. You still have time to adjust your aim. With Nemesis the Tentacle, you still have time to adjust your aim a little bit. With this killer, whenever you press the button, no matter where you are looking, even a 60th of a second later, it's going where you press the button. And I get that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad or a good thing. I'm just saying this whole video is not really a complaint about weakness of the killer. It's just like, it just feels bad. I just don't like that. I'll be looking at someone and I'll like slightly not be on target for the first initial click of the power. I'll click it and then I'll adjust, instantly, but it doesn't matter. My power is just going off somewhere else. It's not even visibly on my screen anymore because I have really high DPI. So if I try to flick an attack or something like that, it's literally just off the screen somewhere else where I used to be looking. And that I really don't like. Again, it's not necessarily bad or weak or anything like that. It's just one of those things that I don't like. To me, it's like Pyramid Head's tank controls when he's trying to use his power. It's not necessarily bad. I just don't like the feel of it. And a lot of this killer comes down to I just don't like the feel of things. The wolf form is admittedly a lot better now. It does feel like the haste orbs give a lot less haste than they used to, which would make sense because they made his base kit much faster. So you'd kind of have an overpowered scenario where you have just a Bloodlust 2 killer just running around. I feel like that would be probably a little unfair. But for the most part, the wolf form feels fine. It just feels like, you have a worse Wesker dash where you can't control when the second dash comes out. That is probably my least favorite thing about the wolf dash. With Wesker, you can dash once and then hold it or not hold it, immediately let it go, see how the survivor's going to react, try to juke. If they're going to try to juke you, you can hold it and then wait for that. Or you can just let it rip immediately around a corner, and that's all great. With this killer, you can't control when the second pounce goes. It's on an exact preset interval. Unless you hit a wall, the wall will make the next pounce come out faster. But for the most part, you are on the exact same timer. So for survivors, it's actually a lot easier for them to dodge you because they know the exact time that they have to actually dodge. With any other killer, you can hold it or not hold it depending on how long, you think they're going to be juking or not. But with this killer, it's always like the same preset interval, and that makes it really awkward to use. Honestly, the best thing about wolf form is just you are a third-person 115 killer, which is pretty good in its own right. Not even Chucky can do that. But another really bad thing about the wolf form is you cannot moonwalk, really. You can't walk backwards. And the reason is you get slowed down massively. There's no like backstepping animation for the killer, so you go at like half move speed. So if you're trying to mind game at a loop, you're actually just losing a shit ton of distance walking towards that direction now because you're moving much slower. So the double pounce just feels way worse than Wesker. Doesn't even apply like an infection hit or anything. And I understand that obviously these powers can't be as strong as the killers that have similar powers, or why would you ever play that killer anymore? They of course have to be weak. But I don't really like the concept of a killer that has multiple powers that are already done in the game that are all just weaker. And you would say, oh, well, then why do you like Vecna? Well, it's because Vecna, really nothing that he does was done before by the game. The ability to like lift a pallet up is not something that's been seen in the game before. The fly feature has not really been seen before. And even just the conal attack, you could argue that's kind of like Artist, but the way it's dodged with the crouching and the fanning out, even that's a little different. So most of the things that Vecna does while still having a multi-tool set are very different from what you can already do in the game. But everything that this killer does is just you can already do it in the game. And the bat form, I'd say, is probably the most unique overall. Again, it's basically just Vecna's fly, except it is unlimited in duration. And it also combines a little bit of spirit blindness and stuff like that. And I will say the times I feel coolest with this killer are when I'm a bat and I'm chasing a survivor. I hear them vault through a window. I get out of bat form immediately, and then I try to like block it. But sometimes they just phase through me anyway, and then it doesn't really do anything. Whereas like actually with Vecna, they made it so you actually retain collision a lot sooner now when you end your fly. So overall, I don't know. It's a feel thing. Just a lot of things about him just feel like I'm just playing a clunkier or worse version of X. And then I'm always just thinking, why not just play that killer instead? I do like how there are different loops for his powers. Like for these short loops that you can see over, he's got Hellfire. For the taller loops that are like straight lines like T-Walls, that's what you have Wolf form for. And that's cool. Having that diversity is, interesting in my opinion. I think that's neat. And this killer is absolutely at his coolest when you're swapping between, you're a bat, you fly through a window, swap to Wolf, get one hit, then swap to Vampire and use a Hellfire when they're at the pallet. Like just constantly swapping out, that's when the killer feels coolest. But you can't really do that nonstop. There's cooldowns between power uses whenever you do switch, so it's not as smooth as you would think. But overall, yeah, to me, it's mostly just a feels thing. And admittedly, I've only played him maybe 7 hours total now. I really haven't played him much, but I think that's enough time to realize whether or not I'm going to like the feel of a killer. And he's just not doing it for me, which is a shame. But I will say I have been trying to learn Nemesis, and Nemesis feels way, way better. Even though the hinder thing didn't quite stick, the reduced attack cooldown, the increased infection gain, and the increased range in tier 3, I feel like Nemesis has a massive, massive W in this patch. And he feels way, way better to play. And honestly, I just want to play him rather than just use Hellfire with Dracula. I just want to use the whip with Nemesis because it feels a lot more snappy and responsive and is effectively the same type of attack. So overall, I think the main complaint is Hellfire feels just really awkward to aim, in my opinion. The Wolf form is still underwhelming, despite not being nearly as bad as it used to be, and is just essentially a worse Wesker form with no ability to backstep, despite having a third person 115% move speed. That's really nice. It overall doesn't feel different or new enough to warrant that being like the main form that I use. And then the bat form is neat and whatever, but it's just mostly moving around and dredge teleporting to windows instead of blockers. So for the most part, I think he is a pretty cool design killer, but I'm gonna double down on what I originally said. He just seems like very safe design. It's just stuff that already exists in the game, and it's not really enough to keep me interested. So again, if you guys are having fun with him, that's awesome. I don't think he's a badly designed killer. No need to get offended or think I'm being pessimistic or something. I've basically liked every single killer gameplay-wise since Skull Merchant, and that's been like 6 killers. So they're not gonna. I'm not gonna like every killer in the entire game. That's just ridiculous. So Dracula, unfortunately, isn't for me, but that's about it. That's my thoughts on the killer so far. And back to Nemesis I go. Thanks for watching, guys.